Hi, FIT community.
Welcome to FYI on FIT by Crime Fighters. We are your hosts, Jocelyn
and Isabella. Before we get into our story, we wanted to do a quick little PSA because some of the contents is a little bit intense.
While we may not believe we are nonviolent, our words and thoughts often lead to pain for others and ourselves.
To learn more on how to improve relationships in your home and in your community, visit our website at nonviolentcommunication.com.
Once again, that's nonviolentcommunication.com. So just a quick reminder to everybody, and this serves as a trigger warning as well, that the story that we're about to present is graphic, it's violent and sexually graphic, so just keep that in mind, please.
We chose this story because we wanted to do it on college campuses in New York. Our story comes from the YouTube account Rotten Mango. It is a story about a sex trafficking cult ring that started in a college campus. So some of the members in the house that are more relevant to the story are going to be Talia Ray, which is Larry Ray's daughter.
Yeah, and then we have Isabel, who is the friend of Talia, and later on becomes Larry Ray's wife.
Yeah.
And then we have Santos, who is Talia's, in the beginning, current boyfriend. And then later on, they separate, but he's remains, still part.
Yeah. He doesn't actually live in the dorms, but since Talia, at the time, is his girlfriend, he spends a lot of time at the dorms.
Right.
So he's heavily in contact with Larry and will remain in contact with Larry even after they break up. Daniel is another one of the roommates.
And then Claudia is, I guess, the most well-known out of everybody, just because later on, her video kind of like the breaking point to like revealing this whole scheme. So this all starts when old, fat, ugly Larry Ray moves into his daughter's dorm at Sarah Lawrence's college. And so this is around 2010.
Larry is also fresh out of jail, and he needs a place to stay while he looks for his apartments. This dorm has 8 kids in it. Each have their own room. It is kind of built like a house.
Right off the bat, he's super helpful and just comes in as like a motherly figure to all of them and starts cooking and cleaning.
He starts by like giving them that safe space.
Right, yeah.
To talk about how they have personal struggles. He starts right off the bat with not asking, but telling them that they have personal struggles and that he's the one who can like help them through it.
Just asking rather than, oh no, you've struggled before. I can see it. I can feel it.
It's
like
crazy.
What?
Yeah. So he gives them advice and support, and he's starting off by just implanting like, I'm the one that can help you. Like, I'll just get into your brain and fix it. He starts kind of running this as like a boot camp almost. He gives them missions, as in like clean the house. He starts telling them when they are to wake up and go to sleep.
And I think this has to do with him being part of like the DIA or something like that.
A CIA informant.
Like, and so over time, Ray uses psychological manipulation, intimidation, and abuse in order to take over. And not his daughter.
Yeah.
Like
his daughter's already fixed.
He's now fixing these others. Well, not all 7 of them are part of the story.
He manages to get his hooks into about 4 of them that live there, and then 1 who does not live there. But the other 4 think he's like a weird old bald man.
Later on, they move out and they're just like, this is just hocus. It's like against the rules. Why are you here? Let's just leave. Ray then starts to isolate them from their families and convinces them they have all these struggles that they've been dealing with and suppressed.
And that all of it is because of their relationships with their family.
Right. And so he tries to, quoting this, fix their problems.
And one thing he always worded was liberate them.
Right.
He starts to gaslight them and like coerce them. It takes a very odd like sexual turn.
It does.
A lot of the times he would tell them, well, you're going to be free from this if you do such and such sexual acts and record them and give them to me.
And so he has kind of like a system. He starts off with small tasks. Again, trigger warning, starts touching their genitalia. And then it escalates to them recording themselves having sexual relationships with strangers.
Yeah.
And then presenting it to him as if it's like their homework or something. It's like super disturbing.
This is where he would start to be a little bit psychological with it, where it was like, I'm your only safe space, because at that point he had started to isolate them from everyone, and they seemed to care a lot about what he thought. It was like if he didn't approve, it would flip like a switch in him. He would be like super mad, just lashing out. Then it would be like a quick, but I forgive you. You can do better this time.
It was
constant.
Yeah, like
emotional
battling
roller
like bad
coaster.
cop, good cop at the same time. And it's interesting because these were perfectly healthy young adults who were just at a college campus living life. And all of a sudden this man barges in, basically barges in and kind of breaks them apart.
It's interesting because with a lot of other cults and like psychological manipulation, they go for people who are already struggling. Like you just said, he took perfectly normal people and broke them down so that he could manipulate them and coerce them into doing a bunch of things. This sex cult actually lasted for about a decade, and it went unnoticed, or at least unreported.
Until that one document was leaked from the Department of Justice, and then like everybody was like, what is happening?
Yeah.
So after maybe like a year or two of being stuck in the dorms, Larry then takes them to a one-bedroom apartment out of campus.
I think that they went to Manhattan.
Yeah. And their school is upstate. So it's this one-bedroom apartment, and Larry, Talia, his daughter, Isabella, who's Talia's daughter again.
Or she's Talia's friend and his now second wife.
Right.
Daniel's living there as well.
Right.
Claudia's there. And so is Santos.
Right. And are all in the living room. And so everybody's cramped up.
And Talia and Isabel sleep in the same bed as Larry.
Right. Larry's in the middle. Larry's in the middle. And it's completely weird.
Nah, that's
so uncomfortable. I would be so uncomfortable.
It's weird. Eventually, while in that apartment, Santos also invites his sister to be a part of this revelation where Larry would help her get through school or like accept herself or liberate herself, as Larry would often like to say, from their past trauma that happens to be there now that Larry is around. His older sister is living in LA and is also Larry's wife.
So her name is Felicia.
And
so she's like a psych student, which is very interesting to think like anybody can be susceptible to this type of manipulation. Larry also asks her to do and like take videos of her doing sexual
things.
Right. And then send them to her. And at some point, he tells her that she's in danger.
He's like feeding her these like false delusions and getting her to come to New York. And also Santos and his younger sister who he had brought in, Yalitza, were also believing this at this point.
Right.
And so she ends up coming to New York as well. Talia leaves, and now in the bedroom is Felicia, Larry, and Isabel.
And this whole thing continues. I mean, the torture, the verbal manipulation, just everything continues, and it actually gets worse where he starts hurting Daniel.
Daniel seems to be abused in a sexual but also physical nature, as all of them are being abused emotionally.
Right. That's what he gets on.
Santos is the only one that doesn't seem to be sexually exploited, but he is financially exploited at this point.
Right.
Larry would start to make up like, oh, you scratched my pan. It's like a $18,000 pan or something like that.
And now you have to pay me back.
Yes.
And so what the thing with Santos was definitely the money aspect. He would be like owing him like
$40,000.
Yeah. And so obviously as a college student, I mean,
he cannot
afford that. So he asks his parents, and his parents are frantic in order to get Santos that money that he supposedly owes Larry. So they end up selling the house.
And Santos had dropped out at that point too to pay Larry, get a job,
so he was
and pay
getting
Larry.
Full, like jobs, but the debt just kept increasing with every small little thing that Santos would apparently do, or like, you know, like hurt his property or hurt his feelings even. He was like
emotional
his feelings.
distress.
Right. I was like,
which is, the hypocrisy is crazy.
I was like, what the hell is this?
But then I did want to get a little bit into Claudia, because Claudia ended up becoming like a large source of income for Larry Ray.
Oh yeah, I mean,
It was insane. Like, honestly, it's really sad.
It is.
Because she ends up doing sex work.
Right.
And gets all these clients and
these
high
are
profile
not like,
clients.
Exactly. These are not like your regular schmegular
Clients.
people,
No.
right? These are like the high power people of New York. And so like the starting rate, the first hour was like what, 1,500 or 2,500, and then afterwards it was another $1,000 for every other hour
until it got to, which is crazy to me, 7 hours, where it would cap out after that. And
like,
it would
what
be
are you
at
doing in 7 hours, but whatever.
I don't even know.
The point is that because of Claudia, or through Claudia, he had this immense amount of income coming in, mind you, not paying taxes.
Yeah.
Right? So like all of this is like just piling up on like fraud and just
exploitation,
so
racketeering,
much crap. And this is all happening in the span of 10 years.
Yeah. And at that point also, Larry and Isabel, and sometimes Talia, when she would come to visit, they would use the money that Claudia would be making,
right,
and go to fancy hotels, get the best wine,
right, and shop,
Bergdorf, shopping, like spending thousands on like each trip.
Yeah, like
each
if
hotel
money
didn't even exist.
Right.
And it was because Claudia didn't see a cent because she owed him for whatever reason.
Right.
He was just making up reasons at that point. And then Daniel,
his more sexual.
he had to do sexual things, and
right.
it was kind of like Larry wanted him to like question his sexuality.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, at some point, Daniel kind of like gets out of that headspace, and one day is like, what? Excuse my language, but what the fuck am I doing here?
It would be when they're graduating that he leaves. And right before that, he was like raped by Larry Ray.
Yeah.
But forced to wear women's clothing. After that had happened, everyone seemed to be just like laughing or something, and he went upstairs to the roof.
Yeah, and that's when he had his breakthrough moment. He was like, what am I doing here? He grabbed all his
his stuff and dipped.
And was like, I'm out of here.
Yeah.
And so he hoped that his friends / roommates would do the same thing. They would have that break point and be like, okay, this is not it. Let's go.
Yeah.
But he then learns that, I mean, at
not
the end, when the breakthrough,
6 years later.
that 10-year mark is when he realizes, oh my God, this didn't happen. My friends stayed and still suffered.
Yeah. So Daniel at this point, I guess, is out of the picture. The main breadwinner would end up being Claudia, and at some point Santos also leaves, but not on bad terms. By the time they found him later for questioning, he was on the streets and still in that mentality of like, oh, Larry's a great guy.
Yeah, I owe him my life or something. This like trauma that now Larry is adding to these victims
somewhat rely on him.
Right.
Because he would tell them, you're suicidal.
So then they would believe it.
Yeah.
All end up wanting to self-exit various times throughout the years.
And it wasn't like he said, oh, you're suicidal. He was like, I care for you. You know, you can tell me anything. Like, I can see that you have these traits and stuff like that. So, and after 10 years of that, it can be hard to question it, especially now that they moved into this 1-bedroom apartment
where they're isolated from everybody else.
Isolated from everyone else. And it started a little bit in the dorm, but he would start to sleep deprive them and to lock up the pantry.
Yeah.
So he was depriving them of like basic needs. And when you don't have those needs met, you don't think clearly. Yeah.
I would start losing it. Like,
no, it's like you can't even function. I mean, you don't sleep.
Right. When I don't have a snack, I could get hangry. Can you imagine these? I mean, like bringing it back to being serious, right? But like, I think I remember that Santos was left to be awake for like a week or something, or like a few days. So like, just that literally can break you. Like,
you'll believe anything.
Yeah.
Once Felicia's in the apartment, she seems to suffer the most emotionally, psychologically. Like, he tends to target her the most.
And I think because he knows that she is not fully in yet, because she has some moments where she's like, where am I? Why am I here? She kind of questions him and what he's doing, but she's not yet fully like, I need to go. It's really sad. There's clips of where she's like,
she's the one the
"Please
most
save
clips.
me, Larry, save me." There's one clip where she's just there and she's literally just staring blank ahead, and she's like, I guess having that kind of like that Daniel breakthrough moment, where she's like, what am I doing here? And then Larry catches her and he like smacks her
to the ground. Like,
and I'm like, what?
and I think at that point too, she was wearing her college shirts to remind herself, I have a life outside of this.
And she's like, I still have time to go back and like finish my career, like let me go back. And Larry's like, no.
He made her write that thing to
to her university,
she had been doing malpractice and to take away her degree or to take away her
license,
license.
And I think that's the point where she's just like, that's it. I've lost it forever.
Yeah.
That's it.
I mean, understandably, her psyche broke. She regressed almost as if she was like a child. Also, he would compare her to Isabel.
For Isabel, I find it very interesting because
she was kind of the only one that made sense that she would get indoctrinated so quickly. She was already isolated.
Right.
She already didn't have
she was like an easy target to go right ahead. And
so maybe that was why she was the favorite, because she never questioned him or anything.
He was right off the bat like, yeah, Larry's my savior. And he liked that.
I think that's why he chose very educated individuals, because he liked almost the challenge.
And the power it brought. Like, can you imagine like belittling somebody else who has like more like
education,
who's smarter in a sense, and you're just like, yeah, but I know better than you. That just boosted his ego.
When the trial did come, he got called a pathological liar and a narcissist. So he definitely did get off on that ego and that power.
And talking about the trial, it brought people to the attention of like, how can somebody, just one person, do all of this damage and nobody ever reported anything?
I think once they left the school, who was going to report it?
Even in college, on the college campus, I find it so weird that none of the classmates or the professors found something weird and was like, what's going on?
The other roommates would come into play later, but I'm so surprised that they didn't complain about this random man in their dorm.
Would.
Yeah, I would.
Like,
we've
who
lived
is
in
this?
dorms. Yeah.
I'm so
I don't
glad
care
that
if
we
he's
don't
your
have that
dad.
problem.
Like, get out. What are you doing? At this point, Claudia was the main
income source
for
all of them.
Yeah.
Especially for Larry.
Yeah. She would be the reason that this travesty would even be uncovered.
Right.
She would end up seeing, like, I don't know, up to like 7 clients a day. Every day. At some point, she asked for a day off, and he would say no. That's when he had her record the video that ended up going viral. And in that, he was telling her, "You're doing this of your own free will, like being recorded."
Right.
And she said yes.
And again, little side note: why would you record yourself saying that?
And he asked her, he's like, "Why are you doing this?" And she almost answered like, "'Cause I just want to tell the truth."
Right.
That's
I just
really not a good.
And it was all very, very, very scripted. Like off the bat, very scripted. It didn't sound like she was genuinely like saying that, "Oh, I want the truth to come out." It was very like, "I want the truth to come out." But she wasn't even looking straight at the camera. She was kind of just like avoiding the camera, kind of avoiding him as well, because he's the one who's recording this. And so he's leading her with these questions, and obviously she has what he wants to hear.
Yeah.
Right. The entire video is so strange and just...
She looks out of it. When I first watched it, I didn't know the context of the case. And I was like, oh, is she like on something? But now knowing it, it's just like she was hungry. She was tired. She was being sexually abused every day for years. In it, he tells her, like, what did you do? And she says that she poisoned Talia and Larry Ray.
And that she's, like, the mastermind of this, and that Larry was only a victim. But, like, how are you recording this video and leading her if you're the victim? It just doesn't make sense.
When they've sent this video out, I believe that they sent it, which I don't know why they would do this, but they sent it to the college students. Even though she was already 6 years out of college.
Right. Larry, I guess, sends out like this huge email with her link profile. With the link to her profile, or like her webpage, and it has a picture of her, and it says, "Hey, I am a sex worker. These are my hourly rates. These are my sizes." And everybody's confused. Everybody's like, "What the hell is this?"
And the 4 original roommates that left would see this. First, they tried to contact the police. And I guess with how outlandish it sounded,
they just didn't believe them.
They didn't believe them.
They were like, whatever.
And so they contacted their friend that worked at the New York Times. And that's when everything came to attention. And it was one of the roommates or a previous relationship that Claudia had had. They found a way to contact her in between her bookings. And he was like, I have a hotel for you in Pennsylvania or Connecticut or some in another state nearby New York. Like, he asked her, can you get there? And so that's when she ended up leaving. That was the escape. But that wasn't till 2020. It wasn't.
And so then what really broke this whole entire story was that file of the Department of Justice. This file is completely like off limits.
Off limits.
Like classified, super classified, but somehow it got leaked. And they sent out an email. They were like,
don't read it, guys.
Don't read it. And
Please don't
obviously,
read it,
what would you do if somebody says that? I'll read it.
It was like top names because again, Larry had connections to
The big
many
people.
powerful people because he was such a powerful dude.
And apart from the names, it was the amount of money they had paid for Claudia's services. And these are not like $100. These are like in the thousands.
And most of them were not just one time.
Oh, no.
You can even find pictures of her with some of these clients in
outings.
Right. And why would she be invited to those things unless they knew her personally?
Right.
After this was released with the New York Times, an investigation was started and they got back into contact with Santos, who for whatever reason was on the street. I guess he paid him what was owed and got kicked out. When they found him, they were asking for, I guess, like a witness statement. When they asked him, they were like, oh, he's a great guy and this and that. And they replayed him some of the video evidence that they had from Larry's phone of Larry, screaming and yelling at him. Basically just the abuse that Santos had gone through. It wasn't until that moment that Santos realized that it was wrong.
That was his breakthrough moment where he was like, oh, shit.
That is kind of the end of public knowledge. They didn't really release a lot of statements other than the one that was leaked with the names and prices that were given to Claudia.
Or more on this story.
You can check out our main source, which was Rotten Mango. Now that we've covered the very intense Sarah Lawrence college campus case, we did want to go over a few safety tips. And we're so happy to invite our guest, the head of security at FIT, Mario Cabrera. So hi, how are you?
Hello. Thank you for having me.
If you could just please introduce yourself to our audience.
Sure, absolutely. I've been in campus law enforcement for 28 years. I started back in 1995 at City University, and I made my way up through the ranks. I did 5 years as an entry-level officer, 5 years as a sergeant, a year as an academy instructor. Then I spent 3 years as a lieutenant, and then I was asked to join FIT in SUNY, which is fantastic. This is Shangri-La. I love this job, not just because they pay my bills, but I always joke and I say that, if my kids weren't used to eating, I'd do this for free.
We're very glad to have somebody so experienced on our campus. And as the expert, we were just wondering if you had any safety services that this college provides for students.
Absolutely. One of the things that I wanted to mention right off the bat is an emphasis on the NYPD and the New York City mantra that if you see something, say something. I can't tell you how many times there's been something that has happened on or near the campus that was actionable, but because no one thought to let us in on it, we didn't find out until after the fact, and there was not a lot of recourse we had at that time. It's something that I like to always emphasize whenever I get a chance because it's super important for what I call the bystander mentality. People should feel empowered that if their gut says something's not quite right, it's better to have us come and check it out versus finding out later, wow, it was really something serious or it led to something serious that could have been avoided off the top. As far as safety services, we run a shuttle from the campus to Kaufman Hall, and that runs pretty much 24 hours. It runs every 15 minutes from 8 a.m. to, I would say, about 11 or 12 midnight, and then it's on demand after that. So if you need it, we show up.
Nice.
Sometimes you can walk there faster given traffic because 8th Avenue is hellish when it comes to traffic. So we also offer a walking escort. So if you don't want to wait, you want to walk, we're happy to assign an officer to walk you over. But speaking of 8th Avenue, it is not very savory. So I've often been told folks, if you're going to walk, take 7th Avenue and then just cut across because there's too many hot spots on 8th Avenue that you're better off avoiding. Other services that we provide, we generate the IDs for the campus. We've got over 300 cameras throughout the campus.
Oh, wow.
And that's growing. We're in the middle of transitioning from our standard cameras to AI cameras. The AI cameras are really good because it can distinguish between individuals, cars, property, and oftentimes it can be used to quickly zero in on something that we're looking for. It'll tell us when there was activity. We also have a very, very good working relationship with the NYPD. There's other things, Lost and Found. We run the Lost and Found.
Oh, yes. I've had to use that service before.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I have to tell you that in my experience in working higher education, FIT students lose the coolest things.
Yes.
I mean, when we get a call, somebody doesn't say, "Did you find a handbag?" They'll call and say, "Did you find my patent leather quilt stitch Chanel clutch?"
Yeah.
That sounds like an FIT
sounds
student.
accurate.
That's an FIT student.
Exactly. But I'll tell you, the oddest thing I've ever seen wash up on Lost and Found was a hoodie with 3 sleeves.
Oh.
What?
And I'm looking at this thing going, how does this work? And I'm turning it around and I'm flipping it around. And somebody made a hoodie with 3 sleeves. And it turns out that the 3rd sleeve was the hoodie that went all the way down. And it was cuffed at the end like
so
a sleeve.
it looked like a sleeve.
So if you put it on, it was 3 sleeves coming down. But I had to put it on in order to figure it out.
Oh, my
That
God.
is so funny.
It speaks to the creativity of FIT.
A little bit ago, you were saying some tips on just avoiding 8th Avenue. I was wondering if you had any other tips that you could recommend for being on or off campus.
Sure. We do the escorts, but it's always safety in numbers. So if you're going to go anywhere, it's always best to go with someone. If you do happen to be alone and you feel like you're being followed, go into a public place and ask them to make the call for you. They'll do the right thing, but at least get out of harm's way. You're less vulnerable in a public place, particularly in a business. And for those of us who like to go out drinking, you have to keep an eye on your drinks. Aside from campus law enforcement, I've also done emergency medical services for many years. I was the lead medical support for all of the rave parties at Governor's Island for many years.
Oh, wow.
So I'm very well versed in what can happen if you don't pay attention to your drinks. But I'll have to tell you that 100% of the individuals that came to us with a drug-related issue, each claimed that somebody put it in their drink. So apparently there's like a Molly fairy floating around, sprinkling Molly into everyone's drinks. At least a small percentage of those were spiked. No drink is worth saving. If you have to go somewhere and you've lost sight of it and to come back and get it, no drink is worth that. Toss it out, take it with you. Oftentimes people say that's money wasted. No, it's not money wasted.
$20, it's fine if you waste it if you get home that night.
Yes.
Exactly. One other thing I would certainly caution on is to look out for one another when you do go out. I've worked events where individuals will be with somebody who's intoxicated, stuff their intoxicated friend under the table, continue to have the party while they're monitoring them, right? Making sure that they're okay because they don't want that person getting in trouble.
Right.
And then at the end of the night, they pull them out from under the table and drag them home. And I tell folks, you're not going to get in trouble. When it comes to drug use, you can only get in trouble for what's in your pocket. You cannot get in trouble for what's in your system. Oftentimes, people don't get help because they think they're going to get in trouble. Too many lives are put at risk as a result of that. I also wanted to mention that our officers are trained in the administration of Narcan. If you're not familiar with it, Narcan is an opiate blocker. We have Narcan on campus. We have it at all the residence halls.
I think I've seen it also in the dorms right in the front, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Every defibrillator on the residential side has 2 doses of Narcan in each one. To date, we have not had to administer it, but it's something that we're ready to do if that's the case.
This kind of relates all to now with technology developing and FIT students being very tech savvy. Is there any safety tips you might have for students when it comes to like social media, the internet?
Sure. One of the biggest things going are scams. And unfortunately, certain individuals are targeted. International students are often targeted. There's a couple of scams going. One is where they try to get your social media information and they'll offer you something like free comedy night tickets for $30. And I'm like, wait a minute, the math doesn't add up. How is it free costing me $30?
That doesn't add up.
They're going to give you the tickets whether they get money or not. They want you to have the tickets, but then they're going to get your social media information. Another common scam that'll happen is that once they get that information, then they're going to give you modeling gigs. Usually that's not what's waiting for the individual.
That was a lot of information, and I'm glad we had you here, and I feel so much more educated right now. So just thank you for your time and being able to participate here with us in this podcast.
Yeah, we really appreciated your guest appearance.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.
So once again, thank you to Mr. Mario Cabrera for being here in our podcast and giving us these tips and tricks for our audience. And we hope that you guys enjoyed the story and can learn a little bit more about staying safe on campus and out of campus.
Thank you guys for tuning in for this episode of FYI on FIT by Crime Fighters.
I'm your host, Jocelyn.
And I'm Isabella. Thank
you for listening. Until next time. Bye. And cut.